Right. Okay, let's make a start. Right, we're up to the Mishnah. Yeah, we're up to the Mishnah. Okay, Mishnah on Yud Aleph Amud Aleph. So we go back to the main theme of this parak, which is when it comes to arrangements between shutfin, partners or neighbors, and what happens, what are their respective responsibilities, what are their entitlements. And the Mishnah talks about the situation where you have a jointly owned space of land, such as a chotzer, right, courtyard between, let's say, two houses on either side of the courtyard. And then the question is, when they divide up, or they want to divide up, what's the minimal size that it has to be left for each of them in order for one of the two parties or partners, whatever, two neighbors, to force them to force the other one to divide up the chotzer. Okay. In other words, we're talking about a shared space of land, which by default everyone's happy. That's fine. We're all happy. We're sharing a space of land. No problem. Everyone's okay with that, right? What is the minimal size it has to be in order for me, one of them, to be able to force the other one and say we'd like to go our separate ways? You know, you'll keep your part and I'll keep my part to divide the area. And the Mishnah says like this: you can't divide the chotzer, you do not divide the chotzer, courtyard, until you have 4 amos for each of them, for each of the respective people in these two individual houses. So that means to say, it would seem, we'll see the Gemora will complicate things slightly, but it would seem that there has to be a minimum of 8 amos, so that they're each left with a space of 4 amos, which is the usable size courtyard. And then the same principle applies to many other cases. A field is only useful. You can only force the other one to divide it up if you have 9 kav for each of them. Okay, so 9 kav for each of the two. Rabbi Yehuda says 9 half kav for each of them, so that's significantly less than obviously than it's half than that of the first opinion in the Mishnah Tanakh. You can't divide up the gino, which is basically the area they used to use to grow seeds or grains or whatever. You can't divide that up until it's half a kav for each of them. There has to be enough left after the division to be a half kav for each of them, which that area of land is apparently works out to around about 8 meters by 10 meters thereabouts. It's not such a tiny patch of land, but it's the amount of land that is worthwhile sowing seeds in, basically, right? Rabbi Akiva Omer gives us base rova, and again he says half that amount, even a base rova is enough. But it's not just about land. V'lo es ha-traklin, v'lo es ha-muron, right? And neither traklin and muron. Rashi says these are types of palaces or whatever it is. These are types of houses that similarly v'lo es ha-shovach, and not a shovach, which is a dovecot. V'lo es ha-talis, neither a talis, which in this case means a garment. V'lo es ha-merchot, no bathhouse. V'lo es beis habad, an olive press. V'lo es beis ha-shlochin. Beis ha-shlochin is a well-watered field or whatever that they used to be able to sow things in, and and the point is, because it's watered well, it has its own water supply, it's useful even a smaller parcel of land than the ones we mentioned earlier. You can't split these until there's sufficient for each of them to make proper use of it, to use that space for what it was meant for, that space or that item. Zaklal, this is the principle, this is the rule, says the Mishnah. As long as you can divide it up and it's still called by the original name. So if you divide your dovecot in half and it's still called a shovach, it's still called a dovecot, it's not called a useless piece of wood, then you can divide it up, right? Then you can force the other one to divide. If not in chalkim, you can't divide it. Amos, when is this bisman she'ein shneim roitzim? Mishnah says that's only when they both don't agree. If they both agree, if we both agree, we're both partners to a tiny chotzer, right? But we're both happy. We both say we like to divide that up, and you can only use your half, and I can only use my half. Then everyone is fine. We're both in agreement with that. So they divide it up. The Kisvei HaKodesh says the Mishnah Kisvei HaKodesh, there's an exception. When it comes to Kisvei HaKodesh, which means what it says, Kisvei HaKodesh is in the 24 books of Tanakh. That's exactly what it means. Even if they both want to divide it up, lo yachloku, they're not allowed to divide it up. And that's for an entirely separate reason, to do with the fact that it, of course, causes a disgrace, a gunai to Kisvei HaKodesh. Kisvei HaKodesh, they used to always write their Kisvei Kodesh, whatever, any of the Sfarim of Tanakh always written in, like, it would look like our Sifrei Torah. So to divide them in half, even if we have shared ownership, so to divide, Sefer Yeshayahu into two halves or whatever is not appropriate. It's not befitting Kisvei Kodesh. And even if they both agree, they don't agree. Yeah, they both agree. Two people who own the Kisvei Kodesh, like let's say a Sefer of Megillas Rus or whatever. And even if they agree and they say, look, actually, it's easier for us. I'm going to live in a different country, so I'm going to take the first two prokim, and you take the last two prokim, right? It doesn't matter. You can't do it because it's not.
Can you take one takes 12, the other takes 12?
12, what?
You said you've got 24.
Oh, no. Yeah. Separate Sfarim is fine. We're talking here where you have one, exactly, each individual Sefer of Tanakh. Yeah, each individual Sefer of Tanakh. That's right. I mean, look, on a basic pshat level, right? This seems to be the reason why the Mishnah had to say, right? Bizman sheshneim rotzim afilu pachas mekayin yachod. It's obvious, right? If we both agree, then what's the problem? If we agree to split a piece of land, yeah, that we both jointly own, what's there to discuss? You and I are both in agreement that we're going to split it. So what are we worried about? So it seems to be specifically to highlight the fact that it does not apply in the case of Kisvei Kodesh. And in fact, when it comes to the latter part of this perek, which is several daf time, after it goes, it actually talks about, is a very, very fascinating Gemora about the Chofta Sorim of Tanakh, and in particular the Gemara goes through the authorship of the different Sifrei Tanakh that is in the end of this parak, which comes off this mission. Let's see Rashi. Rashi says Traklin and Mura, many Paltan types of palaces, based on Shlachim Mayon, because it has a wellspring of Yodel Ashkosei Toder, and you water it all the time. Therefore, Membo Tes Kabin, Zorim Bo Shazroim. If it doesn't have 9 kav, you sow in it other seeds or whatever. Therefore, afilu b'pachos mikan yesh b'din chalukah. Therefore, even less than that has a din chalukah. Rashi just simply explaining here why it is that this is a smaller measure. The Beis HaShlochin is because it's worthwhile growing things in, because it's got a water source within it. Afilu b'pachos mikan yachluku. Says Rashi, because that's what I just said, because it wants to say that with Kisvei HaKodesh, with the Sifrei Tanakh, even if they both want to, they can't divide it up. That's why Toni Reisha Yachloku. That's why the first part of the Mishnah mentions it all. That if you both want it, they both want to, they can divide it up. Kisvei HaKodesh is Chofta, it's from 24 Psalm of Tanakh. But Yeruginim L'Kois from Begillah and Sefer Torah. They used to write them in a scroll like Sifrei Torah. Shalom like Sifrei Torah, Shalom like our Sifrei Torah. Therefore, Gnai Hadav L'Chotfon. It's not something appropriate. It's a disgrace to the Sfarim to cut them up, to divide them up.
What's Gideon?
Gideon is a scroll. Yeah, Gideon is it really doesn't literally mean a scroll. A Gideon is really we translate really as a margin, I believe. But maybe that's exactly. But it effectively means that's basically what it means. Yeah, Kosom Gideon. It means to write it on a cloth, on a parchment. That's what it means. Yeah, and that's how they used to write them. Okay, so right. Let's see the Gemara. Rabasi Rabasi says the name of Rabbi Arba Amos Sha'amru Chutz Mishal Psachim. So Rabbi Yochanan throws something in here which disturbs a little bit if you like, almost the simplicity of the Mishnah, because he says when we talk about the minimal size remaining needs to be 4 amos for each of them, that is chutz mishel psokim, that excludes the entranceways. Meaning to say that you have when these two houses open onto the chotzer, right? And therefore they need a space in front of the house where they're going to unload their shopping, right? Or whatever. I mean, to put it, anything they need, right? They're going to unload the donkeys outside the front of the house. So it's not considered to be significant enough. So the chotzer is not going to be large enough unless you have 4 amos use apart from 4 amos in front of your door, right? In order to just unload stuff that you're bringing in. You with me? Yeah, that's what. So therefore, that's what. Tanya Mihochi, the Gemara Bryce to support this. Ein cholkim as a chotzer chivo shmoina amos lazer, shmoina amos lazer. You can't divide the chotzer until you have 8 amos for each of them. For Anan Tanan, surely we learn in the Mishnah arba amos lazer, arba amos lazer. The Mishnah says 4 amos for each of them. So how can it's a contradiction? Ela shmamino. It must mean could Rabbi Asi shmamino. It must be like Rabbi Asi, and this is a good proof. Ve'ekad romilu miramos. Some actually asked this as a contradiction, as a question. It's the same thing. It's just it was asked in this way. So now the Mishnah says in Cholkin as the chotzer sheba arba amos lazer arba amos lazer. You can't divide the chotzer until you have 4 amos for each of them. That means to say I can't force you to divide up the space until you have 4 amos and I have 4 amos. Tanya, surely the Brisa says shmona amos lazer, 8 amos for each of them. And on that, on Rabbi Yassi, Rabbi Yassi said in Rabbi Yochanan, arba amos she'amru chutz mishal psochim. The 4 amos that they described, that was excluding the doorways, right? Excluding the amount you need for your entranceway. There's one Rashi here. Let's see Rashi. Chutz mishal psochim, chotzer shel shneim. The courtyard of both of them, shnei batim psuchin asokah. The 2 houses are open onto the courtyard. But if Pesach arba amos tzorech habayis, in front of the doorway, there's 4 amos, which is needed for the whatever the house needs, lafarik masoim el chamoro, to unload his burden from his donkey. The chutz mi'osen dalad amos, excluding those 4 amos, tzorech arba amos l'shadash mish. You need 4 amos for other purposes, for other purposes, right? So in other words, it doesn't. In other words, you when you make the calculation, which is the minimum amount that needs to be left in order to be able to force you to divide up the chotzer, that calculation only kicks in after you've made sure you've discounted, right, the 4 amos space in front of each of the houses. Now it doesn't tell you whether that means 4 amos by 4 amos, right? Or is it kind of a square? It seems that it is. It seems that we're assuming that the doorway is 4 amos. Well, I think it becomes clear. That it seems to mean 4 amos into the chotzer, and the width is however wide the doorway is. That makes sense? Yeah. 4 amos is around about 1 meter 80, something like that. The length of the desk, yeah, kind of, yeah. I mean, I'm not very good at estimating these things. Our desk is probably a little bit wide now. It's probably about 2 meters, isn't it? Depends if you're measuring for COVID purposes or not. Then you make it. But basically, I think it's around about 1 meter 80. An amma is like there to that, right? So, yeah. And there's 4 of them. Right. Okay. So we can take it around about that, and that means. Yeah, but it means it's quite a larger size. It's quite a larger size as a result. Okay. Any questions on that bit of the Gemara? Okay. Good. Is it 4 by 4? Is it rectangular? So that's what I'm saying. I think we are assuming it is 4 amos sort of into the chotzer, right? And the width will be the width of the doorway. Does that make sense? So however wide your door is, assume that, let's say the door is 4 amos, whatever, then it'll be 4 by 4, right? I don't think it's 4. I think it's 4 amos. You've got 4 amos in front of your doorway, going out in front of the doorway, however wide the doorway is, into the chotzer. That block is your space for unloading your stuff. Discount those 2, and if there's 4 amos by 4 amos for each of them left after that, then I can turn around to you and say, excuse me, I don't want to share this courtyard anymore. You take your part, I take my part, we go our separate ways. Okay? Yeah. This was a very big deal. You have to remember, this chotzer is not just a courtyard. You know, what made it was, they used to do so much stuff in the chotzer. We explained before, right? They used to use it for many, many purposes. So makes a big difference. Omar Rav Huna. More carries on. Omar Rav Huna. Chotzer mischalekes lefti psocheha. So Rav Huna says that you divide up a chotzer based on its entranceways. You divide up a chotzer based on its entranceways. So what does that mean? Let's see Rashi straight away. The second Rashi in the Gemara. You have a courtyard that has two houses. That means two houses opening onto the courtyard. One of them has two doors into the chotzer, but the second house, the other one has only got one door onto the chotzer. And you have someone who is dividing his property, so he might be close to death or whatever, and he's dividing his property to his children. He gives one to Reuven, one of his children, and he gives the other house to Shimon. Didn't divide up the courtyard, didn't say anything about the courtyard. He simply gave one house to one, house to the other. In Bolach Lokas HaChotzer, if they're going to come to divide up the courtyard, this one who has two doors into the chotzer, he takes 2/3 of the chotzer. The Ochiv and his brother notel chelek echod. He takes 1/3. He takes 1/3. Now that's that. In other words, Rashi explains this is a very, very specific case. We're talking about a scenario where there is someone who is dividing up, a father, let's say, is dividing up his property, and he specifically gives one house to one and one house to the other. And one of the houses he gives, let's say, to Reuven has two doors into the chotzer, and the one house he gives to Shimon has one door. So because of that, there's an assumption that because of the way he distributed the property, there's an assumption that he wanted the chotzer to be divided up based on the doorways that they had. Why? Well, presumably, if you have two doors onto the chotzer, you are making more use of that chotzer space. Now, there seems to be an assumption that that's how he wanted it to be. He wanted him to have more usage of the chotzer because he gave him the house with two exits onto the chotzer. That's the assumption. That's our Afuna learns. That's our Afuna learns. Rav Chisda says no. He says no. Arba amas tochol pesach u'pesach. He says you give 4 amas for each entranceway, and the rest you divide up equally. So Rashi says the Bach changes Rashi a little bit here, but the way I'll just read it according to the way the Bach learns it. That means 4 amas opposite the entranceway, and the width is according to the width of the entranceway. So that kind of clarifies what I was mentioning before, that when we talk about 4 amas into the courtyard, we mean it extends into the courtyard 4 amas, and the width is however wide the doorway is. The width is how wide the doorway is.
Isn't this perhaps in Gemora Sukkah?
Yes, there is a Gemora Sukkah. In what way?
It's the same. It's almost the same like so it's discussing what the thing is between two brothers splitting, and needs to be 4x4.
Yes. Now it's really interesting to say. I've written here on my Gemara. Sukkah Gimel Grace. Yeah. And that's right. And I was praying earlier, and I didn't look it up, but I'd written here from a time before that to look at Sukkah Gimel Grace. Chotzer mischalekes lefi p'socheha. Yeah, ein b'din chalukah. That's right. The Gemara there brings the same machlokus, whether you divide a chotzer according to its entranceways or according to its whether each entrance gets 4 amas and the rest they divide equally. Because that's what Rav Chisda says. You get 4 amas for each entranceway, and the rest you divide equally. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a bit. See, there explains it a little bit differently. There the Gemara explains it. Rashi seems to say something a little bit different there, because there he talks about that you have houses. The 2 brothers divided up between them, and one of them took 3 little houses, and the other one took a large house. Okay, if they're then dividing up the chotzer, the one who took 3 small houses gets 3 quarters of the chotzer based on the number of doors that he has, the entrances to the small houses, and the one who gets the 1 house, he gets a quarter. basically. Yeah, he gets the quarter left, right? And the reason Rashi brings there is because the chotzer is made for going in and out the door. That's what it's for. That's what you do with the courtyard. You go from there into your house, right? Or then from there into the street. And they unload it in front of the doorways, etc., etc. Now, the reason why, the reason why this is interesting is because it's not entirely clear why it should be this way. In other words, Rav Huna is the one that's difficult to understand. Wouldn't you agree? Rav Chisda is easy to understand, right? Meaning, if you go, Rav Chisda simply follows the same things we said before, right? That you have, there's an assumption that a door needs a space in front of the doorway to unload. So if your house happens to have two doors, you're going to need a space in front of each door. I don't know whether you use both doors, one door, it doesn't matter. The fact is, that's your usage rights in the chotzer. A doorway needs those entrances, yeah? So, and the Vashachol and the rest they divide equally. But the difficulty really is Rav Huna. Why should you divide up the whole chotzer based on, the numbers of doors? Surely we should divide the chotzer equally. One house, you have two houses. Who cares how many doors my house has? So let's just see the Gemora, because the Gemora first brings a brisa to support Rav Chisda. I think the halacha is like Rav Chisda, not like Rav Huna. Tanya Kavos Rav Chisda, the brisa supporting Rav Chisda, Sochim Sheba Chotzer, entrance ways into a Chotzer, Yeshlen Arba Amos. They each have 4 amos. If this one has one doorway, right? So there's an assumption each entrance to a chotzer has 4 amos. If one has 1 entrance where one has 2 entrances, this one has 1 entrance, he takes 4 amos. And the one who has 2 entrances, he takes 8 amos. And the rest they divide equally. And the Gemora and the brisa carries on. And the brisa carries on. Pesach rochov shmoina amos. If this one had an entrance which was 8 amos wide, notel shmoina amos keneged Pesach. He takes 8 amos opposite the entranceway, but arba amos b'chotzer. And 4 amos in the chotzer. The Gemara says arba amos b'chotzer. Maybe the title. The Gemara's in the brisa. What is 4 amos in the chotzer got to do with anything? You just say he takes 8 amos. If he's got a very wide entrance, that's a door that's 8 amos wide, so he takes 8 amos. So what's the 4 amos? Omar Abai says, this is what the brisa means. Notel shmona amos ba'orach chotzer. He takes 8 amos in the length of the chotzer, va'arba amos ba'roichaf chotzer, and 4 amos in the width of the chotzer. Rashi, if you look at Rashi says, Notel shmona amos ba'orach chotzer. That means the length of the chotzer. The hainu, that means keneged roichaf pesach. Opposite, however wide the entranceway is. So the width of his parcel of land is going to be 8 amos wide, because that's how wide the doorway is. And it will extend 4 amos into the courtyard opposite the doorway. I don't need to draw a picture, everyone's clear, right? Yeah, it's very simple. It's basically saying, like I said earlier, is that the width of this parcel of land is determined by your doorway. And if the doorway happens to be 8 amos wide, so that's fine. It'll be 8 by 4. Yeah, it'll be 8 by 4, that piece of land in front of the door. So the halacha is like Rav Chisda. But to understand the exact scenario, it's worth seeing the Shita Mekubetzes here, who brings the Rashba, who explains this kind of clearly, but at least how Rashi, based on the way Rashi understands it here, which will help us really understand this. And I actually have one that I can share with you all if you're happy for me to do so. Sorry, I just have to turn the screen a second. You'll also get it because it'll be on the group. Hold on a second. Is that all right? It's nice to see it inside because it really, really helps explain this. I took a picture of it earlier to be able to do this. A minute. Let's go. Was it that one? No, this was the one. There we go. Okay, you should all get that one way or another. Can everyone see that? Sorry, it's a little bit dark, but I think it's good enough. Can you see that? Those who are joining virtually, have you got that? Did you get that? Well, yeah. Okay, good. All right, so good. So basically, let me just show you. We're not going to see all of it, but I want to show you part of it. The Rashba first quotes the he quotes the Gemara. The Shita Mekubetzes is one of the, just kind of the background information. This is there's not a Shita Mekubetzes on every Masechta in Shas, but it's a classic collection of Rishonim that written by B'Tzalel Ashkenazi himself. Quite it itself is quite an old work. I can't remember exactly how old. I think it's maybe 400 or 500 years, something like that. But it's a classic collection of Rishonim. And on the Masechtas where you do have a Shita Mekubetzes, it's really almost like an essential sefer of Rishonim on understanding the Masechta. And he brings the Rashba, Pirush Rashi Zal. So first he quotes the Gemora, Amar Afona, Amar Chisda, and then after the bold print, Pirush Rashi Zal, Rashi explains Mishesh the base button, Pirush Gon Zal. He says the Gon, whoever that is, also explains the same way as Rashi, that we're talking about someone who has two houses and divides them amongst his children, and he gives one house to each child. That's what he does, right? One house to each child, and then the question is, then how do they work out to divide up the chotzer? He brings Bahari Migash, another one of the Rishonim. He explains it. Going Reuven v'Shimon Shabonu Batim Berachova. He says the case is he doesn't quote the whole thing, but it seems to be he explains it that we're not talking about a father giving his sons, their inheritance as in the two houses, but we are talking about a situation where you have, let's say, two brothers or whatever, or two people just who build houses on either side of a central space. And then the question is, how are they to divide up that empty parking lot or whatever it is, area between the two houses? This is the key point, what I've underlined. From the words of both of these explanations, both Rashi and the Rimegash, however they explain the scenario in the Gemara, we learned that Dafka de Be'inyan Zeh, it's only in this situation, only in this scenario does the one with two entrances take more than the one with one entrance. If they inherit, or they both buy in partnership together, batim v'chotzer, houses and a courtyard, they just inherit the whole lot together, or they buy together the whole piece, the whole kind of, what do they call it, a portfolio, don't they call it? I don't know, whatever, the whole thing of the, the whole bit of land, which has everything on it. And then they divide the houses. Then they both take equally in the courtyard. And he says, it's proven, some of you might remember this Gemara, where you had two brothers, and one of them got inherited, when one of them took the palace, and one took the piece of, the nice land in front, right? And the one who took the palace, the one who took the gardens, he basically went and built something right in front of the view of the guy who took the house. And he said, I'm building in my own land. That was his claim. Even though he was darkening the light on the guy who owned the house. Alma, what do we see from that Gemara? We see you see that the owner of the house, right, didn't get 4 amos opposite his entranceway. He didn't get that. He didn't get any 4 amos at all. And this is similar to what Shmuel says. If they divide up, they don't have any rights as such over each other. So it seems to be what I think the Rashba is saying here, and why I think it's important, is that we're really dealing here with assumed intent of the father, according to Rashi, the father who's dividing up the property. If the father deliberately gives one child a house with 2 doors leading onto the chotzer, and the other one a house with 1 door leading onto the chotzer, the argument is that he intended, by doing so, that the person with 2 doors would own 2/3 of the chotzer, and the other one would only get 1/3. That's how Rav understands it. And Rav Chisda says, no, not that far. Yeah, it's true. He's going to get more rights in the chotzer, let's say 4 amos opposite each of his entranceways, but not 2/3 of the whole thing. Or according to the Rimegash, it's not about a father giving over to his children. It's about people building 2 houses, and one has 2 doorways and one has 1 doorway. And then the question arises, how do they divide the shared space in between? But in a scenario where people, let's say, buy together in shared ownership a house and houses in a courtyard, then it's obvious you're going to divide. You're going to divide half, right? And similarly, if people inherit together a whole, let's say, a whole piece of chutz and houses together, again, there's an assumption that that they would split it. They would split it sort of half, right? Is that clear? Does that help? Yeah. So that's what. Yeah, talking here more about what the assumed intent is if they took the houses, what the intent is on the chotzer. Skip a few lines to where I've underlined the next little bit. He says, "Va'arba amos elu sha'amru merubois." These 4 amos are square. They're squared because b'sukkah. As you see in sukkah, the son of the Mishnah is in sukkah called ba'ashem va'arba amos al arba amos eino chayav mezuzah. It's not chayav mezuzah. It's not 4 by 4. Ve'eino achim va'shutfin. And it also says the achin, brothers and partners, do not divide up unless you get four by 4. And he says the daikinon Allah, and we infer there if it does have 4 by 4, they divide up. But now the Mishnah says in Cholkim is a chotzer. Surely our Mishnah says you don't divide up the chotzer unless there's 4 amos for each of them. And my kusha, says the Rashba. And what's the problem? Well, kol sheyesh ba'arba amos. Of course, yesh ba'arba al arba. Yesh b'dei arba al shtayim lozeh. Arba al shtayim lozeh. If you have 4 by 4, you're going to have 4 by 2 for this one and 4 by 2 for that one. Elavadai shmamino, it must be arba amasham arba al arba. He proves from the Gemora's question there the fact that the Gemora asks that the fact that the Gemara asks that you don't divide it up, that you should only divide up the chotzer if there's 4 by 4. Surely that will be at least 4 by 2 for each of them. So it must mean that the Gemara understood that when it says 4 amos by 4 amos, when it says 4, arba amos klozer and arba amos klozer, it means a space of 4 by 4, right? It means a space of 4 by 4. Yeah.
Why are we laboring this point so much?
In terms of what?
It just feels.
It's important. What, 4 by 4?
Yeah.
Why? It could be 4 by 2.
No, I'm saying that isn't it self-evident that if you've got 2 people in a shared courtyard, you're going to split it equally?
Sorry, Jeremy's asking. I'm just going to repeat for the benefit. What?
It feels to me self-evident that if you've got a shared courtyard, you're going to split it equally, allowing for the 4 amos of the width of the doorway.
Right, but the question is, Jeremy's asking, isn't it self-evident that you're going to have to split? That you would split? But the answer is, is that no, because we need to know what is that minimal size that I can force you to split up the courtyard, and that's only arrived at if it is a square of 4 by 4 each. It's not good enough just to say a very small. Let's say it might mean 4 by 2 or whatever. It doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that. It's clear that our 4 amos must always mean 4 by 4. Yeah.
In addition to the width of the doorway.
In addition, yeah, separate to the width of the doorway. Separate to the width of the doorway. Separate the width of the doorway. Yeah. Separate to the width of the doorway. Exactly. That's what we're talking about. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, that's just, I think, useful. Those 2 points I think are very useful to see in that rush book. Principally that you have the idea that this whole question only arises in a scenario where there seems to be something which drives an assumption that there is an inequality in terms of what they receive based on the houses they've received. Yeah, because one has 2 doors and one has 1 door, right? Whereas if it's a normal division, you would assume it's half in everything. And also this idea that when it says 4 by 4, it means 4 amos by 4 amos each of them, right? When it says 4 amos for that, 4 for this, it means 4 by 4 for each of them. Yeah. Okay. Let's carry on. Omar Ameima. Ameima says, "Hi, Pira de Sufli. What is a Pira de Sufli?" So Pira de Sufli, Rashi says, the second last Rashi in the Omid, person who has like a pit or whatever inside the chotzer, and they used to put like pips in it or seeds or whatever, lemachal behemoth, animal food. Says 4 amas. This guy who owns this pit for these pips, he has 4 amas in the chotzer around that pit. He's got 4 amas in every direction. We only say this as the Gemora. That's only if he hasn't got a designated entranceway. That means to say, last Rashi, look at the last Rashi. He doesn't have an entrance to the pit, to the digging, just through the exit of his house. He goes out and in that way, a way out into the chotzer, to go after the pit in the middle, that's at the end of his house, in the courtyard, and use it in that direction. Top of the next omid, if he has an entrance which is specifically for that purpose, and that's the way he takes out these these pips or whatever it is, or these seeds that he's going to give to his animals, and he takes them out of his house in that direction, then he only has 4 amas in front of his entrance to that pit. Rashi says on the top of the Omad, he has an entranceway at the end of his house, next to the pit, and by way of that Pesach, that entranceway, he was accustomed to he throws the pips out there, and to take them. He only has in the courtyard, because of that pit, in that pit, he's simply got the 4 amas that is opposite the exit from his house. So again, it's the same principle, yeah? We're talking about assumed ownership rights in the courtyard. This guy, one of the 2 people in the courtyard, has a pit which he owns in the middle of the chotzer, which is where his animals eat from, like a trough, dig a little hole in the middle of the chotzer, whatever, right? Now, the question is, how much ownership does that pit give him outside of the actual pit? And obviously he owns the pit, and that's the deal, yeah? The question is, how much does he get around it? So the Gemora says like this: if he has an exit point at the end of his house, from where he is like kind of designed to be next to the pit, where he can sort of fill the pit with whatever stuff he needs to put in it for the animals, or to take anything out of it, then he just has 4 amas in front of that entrance, in front of that point to his house. But if he doesn't have an exit to his house, so how does he get to it? Just a normal entrance to his house. So everyone knows that he's got a pit in the middle of the chotzer, and he accesses it simply by using his regular entrance and exit point from his house.
Not into the chotzer.
Yeah, into the chotzer. Yeah, but he doesn't have a special little side door that he uses to get to that pit, right? He just goes out his front door with his bucket of potato peels every morning and throws them in there for the animals, but he goes out his front door. So in that case, what does he get? Amema says he gets 4 amas in every direction around the pit. Now just think to yourselves for a minute, what's the problem here? Work it out. What's 4 amas in every direction around the pit? It's 16 amas. I don't know how big this chotzer is, but that's massive. No? You don't think so? It's a lot, no? so because of this, what?
No, hang on, no. It's 4 amas in either direction. So it's 8 amas plus the width of the pit in either direction.
It's 4 amas in every direction.
Yes. So it's
well, it doesn't matter. However big the pit, we don't know how big the pit is, but it doesn't matter. Let's say the pit is 2 by 2. It doesn't matter, right? You're entitling this guy to 4 amas by 4 amas in every direction.
It's actually 8 by 8, isn't it?
Is it?
Yeah, if you take out the pit. Yeah, you've got
Take out the pit is 8 by 8.
You've got 4 plus 4. So you've got 8 plus the pit.
But then the other two directions as well.
6. It's 8 by 8.
Oh, okay, all right. Okay, if you look like that, right. But it's that, yeah.
64 square amas.
64 square amas.
Plus the
Or if they're all squared, yes, I suppose. 50, 60.
diagonal.
I don't know about diagonals as well.
Got the pit in the middle.
Either way, it's an awful lot.
4
Yeah.
on either side. That's 8 by 8.
All right. Yeah. Yes, I'm not sure how he gets to 16. I think it maybe is the width. Here, Rabbeinu Chananel says it's 16 amas in the Chotzer. He must be saying 4, 8, 12, 16 without sort of without squaring it. Yeah. But anyway, the Ravid, because of this problem, the Shittim Mekubetzes brings the Ravid who says it can't be. It's whichever direction he wants to use. It says, yeah, it has to be 4 amas. And the Rashba says, it's obvious it has to be that way. How can one pit in a courtyard take 4 yodos, take 4 times, like all directions, of bias, and a whole house only takes 4 amas in front of the entrance. Yeah. Now that can't be, right? It doesn't make any sense, right? It doesn't make any sense to say that there's. However, the problem he goes on to say is that the lashon of the Gemora seems to imply like Rabbeinu Chananel. Yeah.
So a house has probably got one entrance and maybe 2, whereas the pit is any.
Yeah, exactly. But it's just disproportionate that this guy should be entitled, because he owns the pit and the chotzer, he should be entitled to this massive amount of space around it. So that's difficult to understand. As I say, the Ravid says he's only got in one direction. He presumably has to choose which direction he wants it in. Yeah.
Even if he has the big it just means that he doesn't get Dalatonis on one side. You should still get the Dalatonis on the other 3 sides.
If he has the designated entrance for what?
For the pit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the animals will get to the pit from the other 3 sides.
Yeah, we're not so worried. We don't seem to worry about the animals so much. Presumably the animals will just, it's clear from the continuation of the Gemara anyway, that in those, the animals were wandering around next to the pit, in the houses, the animals were all over the place, right? So we don't seem to worry about the house, about the animals. It's more about his access rights to the pit. It's assumed that because he owns the pit, he must have some extra ownership in the chotzer itself. That's either going to be defined by another side door from his house, in which case, okay, we'll say, well, there you go, that's your 4 amas there, whatever, to get to the pit that way. But if there's no extra entrance, then there's assumed to be some extra bit of land, whatever that is around the chotzer, around the chaftir, around the pit. That's the assumption. Yeah. Okay, right. Omar Rafuna, let's carry on. Omar Rafuna.
So 1 minute, how does the Ravid understand then the Gemora? Because the Gemora draws a distinction between how he accesses the pit. If he's got a direct access.
Yeah.
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 So why does the Gemora have to draw the distinction according to the Ravid? If either way, he only gets the 4 amas in one direction.
So, yeah.
Well, presumably this is 4 amas in addition to his 4 amas for the entrance.
Yeah, we're definitely talking about 4 amas in addition to his entrance to his house. But what Yossi's problem is that which is absolutely right, is that there's no difference then really, because you're getting 4 amas anyway. So you're just getting 4 amas, whether the 4 amas is what distinction is the Gemara making here. And I think that's basically the question of the Shittim Mekubetzes. He says, according to the Ravid, it should only say, he says, well, basically what he says is the Gemara implies like Rabbeinu Chananel, from the fact that it says, this only applies, doesn't designate the entranceway. If he designates an entrance, he only has 4 amas opposite his entranceway. Whereas according to the Ravid, it shouldn't have said he only has 4 amas when it comes to the 4 amas next to his doorway. It should have said with the directions. It should have said like this: if he designates an entranceway, he only has 4 amas in front of his entrance. He only has the 4 amas opposite his entranceway. That's what it should have said according to the Ravid. According to the Ravid, the key point of the Gemara is not about the 4 amas. The key point is where those 4 amas are. Yeah, because according to the Ravid, it's 4 amas anyway, right? It's no more than 4 amas. It's 4 amas, either 4 amas, opposite the doorway to his house, or it's 4 amas wherever he wants it, in some other place, right? So therefore, the phrasing of the Gemara implies like Rabbeinu Chanan, not the Ravid, which I think is basically what you're asking us,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly right, and he doesn't answer that. The Rashba says that's where the Rabbeinu Chanan gets it from. Basically, the phrasing of the Gemara implies that there is a much larger area that he's entitled to. Yeah, very good, fine. So, all right, Omar Rafuna says as follows: Achsadra. Now, an achsadra is it's basically like a porch or a gazebo. Yes, we're familiar with the gazebos. And it's like it's basically a thing open on 4 sides. A gazebo, something like that, right? It's basically it's got a roof and it's got 4 pun. What was that? Yeah, that's a good. I think that's a decent enough way of translating it in this context, anyway. Now this achsadra ain't no daladams. Rafuna says, "I'm an achsadra ain't no daladams." An achsadra doesn't get 4 amas. Now, what does it mean an achsadra doesn't have 4 amas? Because so the reason, and he explains why. The reason is mishum piruk masoi. The reason why you get 4 amas, and that means this. We're talking about the extra 4 amas you get opposite your entrance. That's because you need space to unload the burdens from your animal. Besides other space you need in the chotzer. Here you can go inside underneath the canopy and unload your animal there. You don't need an extra space in front. Okay, Rashi says. Achsadra, and again, I'm going to read it. The Bach changes it here. Sheyesh lo pesach lechotzer, that has an entranceway into the chotzer. Ein lo danadamas, doesn't have get 4 amas. Why? B'chalukas hechotzer, in the division of the chotzer. Tamomai, because what's the reason? Rabban says sheyesh lo pesach bayis danadamas b'chotzer, that the entrance of a house has 4 amas in the chotzer. That means every entrance is entitled to 4 amas. Before you start working out whether there's enough to divide up in the rest of the space, Mishum Pirok Masoi, because of unloading his burden. That he should unload his burden from his donkey, if he should stand bias, Eino Ponu Mikalim, because a house has got lots of items in the way. You cannot bring your donkey with its burden into your house to unload it. That's what I said before. It's absolutely clear from Rashi, and I'm sure it's the same in Rashi as well. The issue is not bringing the donkey in the house. That's not a problem. They didn't have, they had the mud floors or whatever. It wasn't a problem to bring the animal in the house. You just didn't have space because of the what's it called? People wondered about the tying of the sheep to the bedpost. Mitzrayim. It's not strange at all. It was a completely normal thing to do. They lived amongst the animals. It wasn't like I know it sounds strange. Of course, absolutely. It's all relatively recently, until the introduction, basically, of some form of carpet or whatever in a house. There was no reason why animals wouldn't go in and out at leisure. A donkey probably wouldn't spend too much time inside because it makes it a bit crowded. But the problem is only that you've got things in the way, and therefore the donkey. You're not going to bring a donkey in your house. You have to unload the donkey outside the house. Hoch over here, Bachsadra, says Rashi, Kivon de'ein lo defonos, since it doesn't have any walls, after them you can bring it inside and unload. In other words, because this Achsadra, this pavilion, this portico, whatever it is, this gazebo type structure, you're not going to keep Kalim in. You're not going to keep items in because it's open on all 4 sides. So you've got space in it. And because you've got space, you can bring the donkey inside. Therefore, you don't need space outside in the chotzer to unload your stuff. The Rashash here explains what the scenario is.
So
this is important. So if you read the Gemora, if you learn the Gemora, it seems you could understand it as there are 2 people, each one owns a house, and there's a third guy who just has a gazebo, but that doesn't really make much sense, because why would you only have a gazebo? And the Rashash here, he just says a few, if I can find it, he just says a few small words. Just 1 second. Let's find the back of the Gemora. The Rashash says, Roitzeloma means to say, on Rashi. He's explaining Rashi. This achsadra was in front of the entrance of the house, and it was open to the courtyard. So basically, you've got, let's say, two guys, each of them own a house, but one of them has a gazebo in front of the house. You ever seen that these days? They're all over the place, right? Someone's put up a gazebo in front of his house. If you put up a gazebo in front of your house, you forfeit your right, if it's a shared chotzer, to extra donkey unloading space on top of that gazebo space. Why? Because you can put your donkey inside the gazebo. All right. So there you are. Master Rav Shesha has a question on this. Whether it's the gates of houses or the gates of achsadros. Achsadra is what we're talking about. Yesh len dalad amos. They each have dalad amos. So that's a big problem, because this seems to be implying that an achsadra, the gate to an achsadra, also gets an entitlement to 4 amos, even though it's an open on all 4 sides. Says the Gemora, that Bryce is talking about achsadra de Beirav. It's talking about achsadra de Beirav. What's an achsadra de Beirav? Rashi says an achsadra de Beirav, achsadra, the house of Rav, had the phonos sovivlo, had walls all around, elashum kofos chalonos, but it's just surrounded with windows. Basically, an achsadra de Beirav is a marquee. It's a marquee. It's got walls. Okay, so Mora says achsadra de Beirav pshita, and achsadra de Beirav, obviously you're going to get 4 amos for unloading outside of it, because idruna ma'alyahu, it's a room. Idruna, the Masoras Hashas explains that the targum of chedra is idrun. Okay, so it means a room. It's a room. It's a proper room. Who cares whether it's got walls made out of, that you can see through or not? What's the difference? It's a proper room. Because a proper room, you're going to keep your expensive kalim or whatever it is. You're not going to bring the donkey inside. Therefore, you're going to need the 4 amos outside. Ela rather we're talking about a Roman achsadra. What is a Roman achsadra? Rashi says mekofos tefonos nemuchos. The achsadra rumiyaisa was surrounded by low walls, she'ein magios letikra, which do not reach the roof. And because they don't reach the roof, therefore what? So that is why you need 4 amos outside for unloading your animal. You might think, because they've only got half walls, this achsadra has got a roof, it's got a canopy, it's got 4 posts, presumably for things, and then it's got a half wall. The wall doesn't reach the top, right? It only goes halfway up. So you might think that because the wall doesn't reach the ceiling, of this structure, you're not going to really keep many a sofa in there or chairs in there, or whatever. So you might think, you can get the donkey in there. But the answer is you wouldn't.
You can't get in because the wall's stopping.
Yeah, well, presumably there must be a way in. There must be a doorway. So a doorway, but we don't mind bringing the donkey through the doorway. That's not the problem. The problem is there space for the donkey to unload, to bring the donkey in, to unload the donkey. And there isn't. You're not going to do that. There isn't. They used to use it as a normal room, and therefore, if you've got that type of achsadra, you're unloading. You need your 4 amos for unloading space outside, and you basically retain what is effectively your car parking space. Yeah, your donkey parking space, and then you divide up the chotzer in addition to that. Whereas if it's a completely open gazebo, then you don't, because you can bring it inside. Toner Avon Bryce says like this: if you have a beis shar, a gateway, and a chsadra, this portico, or mirpeses, and a balcony, right? In modern Hebrew as well, mirpeset, it's a balcony, right? Yesh lahen dalad amos. They all have dalad amos. I say as well, but I've mentioned before, right? What's his name? What's his name? Who authored the Ben Yehuda. Ben Yehuda was an expert in the Gemora, right? So all the words many words from modern Hebrew are taken straight from the Gemora. So he knew this Gemora presumably. Merpeset, right? Yeshlen arba amos. They have 4 amos. Hoyu. So I mean they all get 4 amos. Now we need to look at Rashi here. Rashi says Beis Shar is a bias cotton shmefnei Pesach trucklin. You have a small house in front of the entrance to a large, a truckling is really like, I think, a large room, or maybe a nice house. The Korelo Purka Balaz. Yeah, and it's called like a porch. That's what it is, it's a porch. Mirpeses is, Rashi brings another old French word, uliah, which is like a balcony. That's what I've translated. That's what I think it's translated as. The Harbe Piska Aliyah Psuchinoi. And there were many entrances to an upper story open to it. Just like a staircase. Yeah. So basically, what happened was what we're talking about here is not a balcony that you're thinking of like a standard balcony on a house. Okay, you had a staircase going up, and then you had a long shared balcony, and opening onto that balcony was, let's say, 5 doors to 5 different houses or different apartments, right? That's the case, okay? Now, the Bryce says it's a walkway. That's what it is. There you get 4 amas. However, the Bryce carries on. If you have 4 or 5 houses open onto the mirpeses, they only get 4 amas. The only amas. Rashi says, they only get 4 amas divided amongst all of them at the foot of this ladder. So it's not that. You might think, well, hold on a second, let's get 4 amas for each of them at the foot of the ladder, corresponding to the number of apartments that are using that space at the top of the ladder on the mirpesa. You don't say that. You say that basically their ownership, their rights, their necessity for unloading is just the 4 amas by 4 amas at the base, or maybe based on the width of the ladder, at the base of that ladder. That's how it works. That's how it works. A chicken coop. Does that get 4 amas or not 4 amas? Let's say someone owns a chicken coop on the chotzer. Is that entitled to 4 amas in front of it? The whole purpose was for unloading the burdens of your donkeys or whatever you want. Here, the chickens, they jump up the wall and they go inside. They go up and they go down. They don't need to be unloaded. They just go in and out themselves as they wish. Rashi says, Lul Shal Tanagolen, buy a cottage from Galim Tanagolen, a small house where you grow chickens, bring chickens up, rear chickens. Yeshlo Pesach Machotza, and Shlochotza, Yeshlo Daladamas Machotza Loi. Does it get promised into the courtyard or not? It goes above the top of the wall, it hops into the chicken coop, and therefore it doesn't, you're not entitled to that space. It doesn't entitle to 4 amas in front of it because it's simply unnecessary. Unnecessary. Yeah. Right. Okay. I think we'll probably leave it there. Any questions? We're okay.
If we could draw a theme of this Gemora.
Yeah.
This is basically looking to see what is your entitlement to for space to unload an animal.
Well, we're looking at the entitlement to space to unload an animal, but where it becomes extremely important and relevant is in a case of dispute, where we have a shared space in the chotzer. Come back to how we started with our Mishnah, and I want to force you to divide up. I say, I don't want to share the space with you anymore. I want to divide into 2 smaller parcels of land. Then it becomes critical to work out how, you've got to exclude from that calculation the 4 amas entitlement in front of the doorways.
Because that was only one.
No, that was supported by Bryce. That seems to be, everyone agrees to that idea. The Arba Amas is excluding the entranceway. So all these things have become very critical, because if the chicken coop gets 4 amas, well, hold on a second, everything's off. All bets are off. You can't talk anymore about the chotzer, because the chotzer says now the space is smaller. We need to give 4 amas to the chicken coop. The answer is you don't. So this is why it's all very important. Very good. Okay.
Thank you, sure. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Bye.
It's a bit like the Tatar, isn't it?